Hi, everybody. Welcome to Screen Less, Play More, the podcast. I am Cynthia, the founder of ScreenLessPlayMore.com, and I have Tessa Stuckey today. And if you have a teen or a preteen or a kid, especially if they have a phone, or if you're wondering if you should get them a phone, please listen in. Tessa has so much great information for us. She is the founder of Look Up. The tagline is Life is Better Offline. It's a nonprofit. And she is the author of For the Sake of Our Youth, a therapist's perspective on raising your family in today's culture. She's a licensed professional counselor. So welcome, Tessa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about that's just so fun and cool is that you do a little thing you call kind of like being a look up fairy. What is that about?
Yeah, so, for many years now, whenever I go in public, and I'm sure everyone experiences this, I see so many families on their devices and little kids with their Nintendo Switches or their tablets and parents on their phones. And every time it gets to me, it gets under my skin. I want to go over there and say, this is y'all's time together. You should enjoy it together. But I also don't want to come across judgmental or pry. Everyone's got things going on in their life. And I couldn't quite figure out the best way for me to not be bothered.
Mhm.
And so I started to think in more of a positive reinforcement way of what if I just somehow found a way to reward the families and the people who are choosing to not be on their screens. And so it started with I took my boys to an outdoor like food truck, hangout, family eatery,
Mhm.
and they were running around and one of my boys came and said, Mom, look at all the kids that are on technology. It makes me sad. Like, we're having so much fun. I wish they'd come play with me. And I was like, you know what? That would be awesome. I'm going to gift all of you kids who are playing. And there were like probably 25 kids of all different ages playing in the field. I was like, I'm going to gift you guys something. So I bought all of them ice cream
How fun.
and from the ice cream truck. And I just thought, okay. And then more kids started coming. I was like, are you going to play with them too? Okay, I'll get you an ice cream.
We
And
want ice cream.
it turned into something where I was like, maybe I could go around every time I'm in the community and either buy someone's meal or gift them a gift card or maybe some cash. I don't know. So it just kind of developed into this thing I do now, and I call it Look Up Fairies. And it's been really great. I don't always follow through with it when I'm out in public if I don't have time, but I really want to praise the people who are choosing to not be on their screens as much.
So if you're at a restaurant and the family is like playing cards or reading books
Yeah.
at the table or something, like, and how do they usually react?
So I have like a little card that explains why I'm doing this and how awesome they are for choosing to look up rather than look down and spend time together. And every time, I mean, they're just like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much!" And they'll say things like, "Yeah, this is just what we do. We don't like screens, or we don't, they have plenty of screen time at school, so we make sure." So it's always really well received, of course. And then there's times when, like there's some teenagers at the park and they're actually hanging out or doing something fun rather than sitting on the swings staring at their phones. And so, of course, they are really sweet and appreciative when, like, there's been times I handed them over, Starbucks gift cards or a $100 bill, and they
Oh,
just are,
wow.
and I tell them to split it, and they go and they just love it. So it's always well received, obviously.
Wow, that's so cool. And it's something that everybody could do. Or even
Yeah.
just to say like, "Hey, I noticed that you guys aren't on your screens. Good
Yeah.
for you." That's
Yeah.
really fun. I love that idea. Um, so I do want to say we're going to talk about your book, and some of the stuff is a little bit heavy. So if people are
Hmm.
like listening with little kids in the car, they might want to come back and listen to this later when the really little guys aren't in the car. But it's probably the kind of conversation that somebody would want to listen to and then possibly re-listen to with their teen, perhaps,
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
you've got just so much great info in here about some really serious issues that are happening, especially with teens in this digital age. But also, your book is just full of like really concrete, actionable things we can do
Mm,
to
yeah.
turn the tide. And again, it's called For the Sake of Our Youth. And so you talk in the book about your work as a counselor, and um, you were noticing that pretty much all the teens that were coming to you were, there was a trend that they were all reacting the same way to adversity, and it was really shocking you. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I became a therapist a little over a decade ago, and so I was still in my 20s. And I remember thinking, I'll become a therapist. I'm in my 20s. I feel like high school was yesterday. These teenagers will be so easy to work with, and I could be so relatable. And I was quickly made aware of how unrelatable and disconnected I felt because of this one thing. They would come to me with typical life stressors. Mom got mad at them. They didn't empty the dishwasher, or they made a C on a chemistry exam, typical life stressors. But their go-to answer was always a dark, dark thought, whether that be self-harm or suicidal thinking. And it was so perplexing to me because we all have life stressors. And you're telling me that because your friend got mad at you, you're going to think about something that dark? Like, surely there's more to the story here. And so, being a novice therapist, I thought, okay, I'll peel back the layers. Surely there's trauma, there's abuse, there's neglect, there's substance use, there's some mental illness going on. And time after time, I could not find that. And I really started researching more, talking to colleagues, talking to families, talking to families who had lost their teenager to suicide, and really trying to figure it out. And I found in my research that every single one of them had issues that were rooted back to an overuse of unhealthy screens or social media. So at the time, my four boys were 4 and under, and I just lost too much sleep thinking I'm raising my kids in today's world where one, suicide and self-harm seem to be normalized and sometimes glorified. Um, and so easy for kids to just jump to. What can
Hmm.
I do to raise my kids in this world and protect them from that? And that's what I figured out. And what is in my book is that preventative care. Um, and I started speaking to parents of preschoolers to talk about this. But of course, parents of preschoolers are like, well, either we don't do a lot of screens, or my kid's not talking about suicide, or, they don't have social media yet. Right. And so it became bigger pretty quickly that I realized that this was a true societal, cultural issue that was almost encouraging our kids to live in a world where if they can't have an instant fix, then they shouldn't learn how to truly self-regulate. And
Hmm.
then when they hit those hormonal years, it's really hard and they want that instant fix again. So,
Yeah, that is so scary. And I have to say, I went to a workshop just the other night at our school for parents, and it was called Screen Sanity. And there was a portion of the workshop where you just sit at your table with other parents and talk about these issues. And there were probably 6 or 7 parents at the table, and 3 of them said that their kids had already talked about suicide, and they were
hmm
in 6th grade.
yeah,
They were
yeah,
11, 12 years old,
hmm
and it's really scary how this is
yeah.
really
And
starting.
that's also what really got my attention was I was getting calls for 16, 17, 18-year olds. And then I just saw it getting younger and younger. And I started, eventually getting calls for 7 and 8-year olds having these thoughts. And again, mine were 4 and under. So I was just like, oh my gosh, like really and truly, is this really what's going on? And that's when I went into a deep dive and found out that it really and truly is going on. And a lot of it stems from this screen obsession or this need to have an instant fix for
So the
any
thought
sort of
is,
discomfort.
they're so used to instant gratification that it's
Mm,
like, I feel horrible. I didn't make the dance team. instead
Uh-huh.
of sitting in my feelings and just coping or feeling like it's okay to be sad sometimes, it's like, how do I get rid of this feeling instantly? And so they're
Yeah.
just like, oh, I know, suicide.
So
That,
that's one piece of it, right? But and it starts at such a young age, and I know I was guilty of this. I was the mom that always had the iPad charged and ready to go to bring to the restaurant just in case someone threw a fit. And you better believe four under four, someone always threw a fit, so it was ready to go. And I realized that starting at 1 years old, we're numbing and depriving them of learning how to self-soothe and self-regulate. We are saying, no, don't feel your feelings because it's making me uncomfortable as your mom. So I'm going to hush you up with this device. And I thought it was magic. I really thought that I was raising my kids in the best time because
right.
my mom didn't have this magical tool that could shush the 2-year-old up and so easily just hand him over, Mickey Mouse on my phone.
Mhm.
And but working with my teenage clients and them saying that they want an instant fix for any sort of distress, boredom, a bad day, a bad hair day, someone being upset with them, all that sort of thing. And they want that instant fix. Well, there's no instant fix for life stressors. But what was I teaching my 1-year-old at the restaurant when he's throwing a fit? Oh, here, just get on this device. So that's one piece of it. There's, as you know from my book, there's 6 pieces that go into how this has created such an epidemic. But the other really big one I want to mention is, well, there's two. Well, there's all 6,
Yeah,
but
I mean, definitely.
one,
I'm happy to go through actually all 6 of them. I've got them written
yeah,
down. We can talk about kind of what these 6 that you found were, how they affect us, and then yeah, what can we
yeah,
do about each one of them? Like, because you
yeah.
started with number. Go ahead.
It's hard for me to not talk about all of them because they all kind of feed off of each other and are blended. So it is
Sure.
important to know all of them.
Well, yeah, the first one you mentioned is that it is recently more glorified in media. I mean,
Hmm.
there's
Yeah,
shows that are actually aimed towards teens that
right.
are showing suicide. And so if it's even in their brain that that's an option and
Yeah.
they've seen it, and then you also, yeah, the second one you talk about is instant gratification. And so I mean, I guess how should we work on that in everyday life? I guess one thing is saying it's okay to be bored. Some of your
Hmm.
best ideas are going to come from being bored. And I guess we as parents then is one of the things we need to do is just stop shoving the iPad in their faces.
Yeah. So number one rule is to allow boredom and then also allow distress. So anytime our kids are bored or upset, there shouldn't be an option for a screen. Even I try in my family, like not even a movie or TV, because we really do need to learn to sit and feel our feelings and regulate ourselves. And that will come from that creativity or journaling or talking with our parents, right? So, what we really want to do is make sure that the screens are not their coping skill. And
Mhm.
so we help our kids build options by um, thinking of things that they can do, replacement activities when they are bored or when they are upset. And that is something that can help them, I mean, exponentially. Just that one thing. We don't give screens during boredom or distress. That right there will build so much resilience in your kids. And it does not matter how old they are. I mean, starting at, 1 or 2 is really, really great. But even if you have a 13, 14, 15-year-old struggling, and it's okay to readjust so that they are not just on a screen every time they're upset.
So maybe having them just figure out an arsenal, like when they're calm, talk to them about, okay, what are some things we could do? Take a walk, punch a pillow, call a
Yep.
friend, like
Yep.
just come
I
up with,
ask these 2 questions. What do you like to do that's fun? And I have them make a list, 3 to 5 things that they think is fun. Working on a puzzle, paint by numbers, going for a run, jumping on the trampoline, playing with their dog, whatever it is. And there are some kids who are like, I can't think of anything other than playing Roblox. And so, okay, well, what did you used to do before you ever got into Roblox? And it's like play with Play-Doh, play with Legos, make bracelets, that sort of thing. Okay, so crafting, so we brainstorm together. And then the second question is, what do you like to do that's relaxing? Take a bubble bath, read a book, listen to music, stretch, that sort of thing. And so those two lists right there are the coping skills list. Things that are fun, things that are relaxing. No matter what the issue is, they're mad at a friend. Well, then they need to go pick something off their fun list to get their mind off of it and to think things through so they can regulate their emotions and then come back and think about how they want to respond to their friend. So those are two really great lists to make. And then I do ask a third one, which is what is safe and appropriate for you to do that won't cause destruction when you're angry. So punching a pillow, screaming into a pillow, throwing, a stuffed animal across the room, that sort of thing.
And then maybe keep those lists handy, keep them on the fridge, keep them
Yeah,
somewhere
depending
in your
on how
room.
old the kids are. Like my kids have them, pinned up in their room. And then I know if I had a 3-year-old, I would want to keep the list with me so I could remind him if he's throwing a fit, like, okay, what's something you can do? Remember we made that list? Oh, look, I have it right here. Pick something off of there. And, you know, th there's all different things you can do to make it more creative, popsicle sticks with things, and they have to pick from the jar and it's got the option on it. My son came up with what we call the board game when he was bored, and he just took a poster that we had, drew a big like pie chart with different options, like 5 or 6 different options, play with Legos, write a story, go outside. And then he would throw like a Lego up in the air, and then whichever option it landed on, he had to go do that thing. So there's all different things you can do that are creative and exciting for kids. Like we also have like a boredom wheel. You can get those like prize wheels on Amazon
Mhm.
for like $20, and the boys will like write random things on each one with a dry erase marker like all the time. And
That's
that's what
fun.
they do. Yeah. So there's ways to make it creative, but you want to encourage your kids. And the hardest part truly with that is that as parents, we are going to feel uncomfortable. Anytime our kids are upset about something or going through something really emotional, um, or they're bored and they're whining to us, right? Like that's
Mhm.
uncomfortable for us. They're throwing a fit, whatever. We get anxious feelings or anger or just frustration. And we have to learn how to sit through that discomfort in order to allow our kids to struggle through their own discomfort. If we can learn to sit through that discomfort, then we are supporting our kids in letting them realize, learn to build resilience, build strength, letting them know you've got this, you can handle this, and you will handle future problems too.
And trying to model it, I suppose. Like last night, I could tell that I was starting to get annoyed.
Mhm.
And I was like, it was building. And then because I had just read your book, it was fresh in my mind. And so I said to my husband, I was like, can you do pajamas and brushing teeth? I need to take a walk. And I went and I took just like a 10-minute walk and I came back. But then because my son was getting really upset and he was getting real
Yeah,
dysregulated, and that was part of
yeah,
what was getting me. And so I
yeah,
came back and I said to him, did you notice that mommy was starting to get really irritated? And I realized, oh, this isn't a good place for me to be. So I took a walk and now I feel so much better. And I just was like, okay, I need to just like remind him, like grown-ups
yeah,
have these moments too. And we
yeah.
have ways to cope so that we don't scream and yell and freak out and get dysregulated. And it's hard to remember. And like I said, I had just read your book, so it was fresh in my mind. But the more that we can remember, like before we lose our
Yeah.
stuff, do
Hmm.
one of the coping mechanisms yourself. And then you
Right.
can point out to your kids that you just used one and like, hey guys, look, it
Yeah.
works. Mommy didn't freak out. Mommy didn't
Right.
scream at you.
And even adding in like, don't you love it that I didn't yell?
Right.
Do you like it when mommy yells? No. So isn't it so much better that I removed myself and I came back? And that's something I want to work on, and I need you to work on it too, and we can help each other. And I would even encourage you to go a step further, and when you are feeling activated or starting to feel those emotions, to verbalize that in front of him and
Mm.
say, I can feel myself getting really frustrated right now. I don't want to get mad, but I can feel it. So I am going to go sit in my bathroom for a minute or go listen to a song or go for a walk. and I will be back and we will finish talking about this, but I can feel it and I don't like it. And so saying that in front of them in real time, one, will help calm you down because it's keeping you accountable. It's you're recognizing it in real time. You're regulating yourself. But two, it's modeling that to them right there.
That's great. And would you say this is sort of the same technology and food? Like your kid is getting really upset and it's like, oh, you're upset. Here's some cookies. This will calm you down. Like try to steer away
Yeah,
from that also, like as a coping
right.
mechanism.
Yeah, so I mean, we could go off on a tangent with that, and I'm definitely not a dietitian or a nutritionist, so I don't want to speak too much on that, but psychologically, we want our kids to associate food with the right things to associate, like fueling their bodies or when they feel their tummy start to rumble and they're hungry, not I need to eat this to feel better. That could potentially turn into emotional eating.
Right. Yeah. Um, so one of the next things you had on the list that is contributing to these kids just not being able to cope is lack of personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
And that also, if we're not strengthening that muscle as kids, it can really lead to social anxiety. And you're
Mm-hmm.
mentioning there's plenty of 20 somethings that can't hold down a job because they're so anxious about
Mm-hmm.
calling on the phone, talking to their coworkers. So, how do we
Yeah.
foster connection early on and make that a
The
habit?
the big one I'm seeing now is that they will apply for a job on, whatever, Indeed.com or whatever, and then never follow up. Like they're coming and so frustrated that they can't get a job. I've applied to 30 places and I'm like, "Well, tell me about the follow up." And they're like, "Oh, no. No. I'm not going to call them or I'm not going to go up there." And I'm just like, okay. So that's a big one that we are currently hurdling. But so when we have this device that is just readily available all the time, and we feel as if it's helping us connect with people because that is the purpose of a phone, and there is purpose behind the internet to connect with others, and that's a wonderful thing. But there's a couple things. But first of all, if that is the only way of connecting, then of course in real life you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're not going to feel confident to talk to people in real life. But the other thing is that the amount of dopamine that releases in your brain when you are on devices is comparable to alcohol consumption, drug consumption, and gambling. So, watching YouTube, playing games on devices, those short videos, though TikTok, that is going to release what's called a dopamine dump. And those dopamine dumps contribute to addiction, sleep deprivation, isolation, anxiety, depression, and lower self esteem and lower motivation. What happens when we see people in person or we can see their face? So even right now, we can see each other through video.
Mhm.
I know the episode is only audio, but you and I can see each other through video. We can hear each other's voices and we can see each other. We are still getting a release of what's called oxytocin. Now, not as much as if we were in person. If you and I were in person and we could like watch each other's body language, laugh together, hug at the end of this, we would be flooded with oxytocin. And oxytocin is another feel good chemical that releases in our brain that makes us feel like these relationships have much more weight and meaning and depth and worth. And it makes us feel important. And so when we only connect through a device, we're getting that dopamine. We are not getting that other piece that makes us feel truly needed and wanted and important and valued. And so we need that oxytocin. And so we definitely, all of my research, I should say, was pre 2020, pre COVID. My book was published in April of 2020. So
Okay.
obviously, I didn't write anything about the pandemic. The
Hmm.
pandemic made everything so much worse.
Yeah.
So so back to the connection piece. So it's really important for us to, one simple rule is if there's a moment of socializing, so hanging out with friends, family comes over for Sunday dinner, or any chance to be out and about, We just don't allow a screen. You don't need to bring the Nintendo Switch to the restaurant. You don't need to bring the iPad to even the doctor's office. You want to provide these opportunities for your kids so that they can learn social awareness, social cues, body language, and social contact with eye contact and face-to-face behavior.
And then would you say, like, does the oxytocin almost like level out the dopamine so that it's like almost less of an addictive thing and more of a connective thing?
Well,
Or
so when we get dopamine when we're with people, same with oxytocin, it's not a dopamine dump. It's called a dopamine drip.
okay.
So little things like making your bed, finishing a book, and laughing with your best friend, you're going to get releases of dopamine and more than just sitting doing nothing, but they're dopamine drips. Same with oxytocin. You get dopamine dumps with the substances, the gambling, the gaming, and the social
Interesting.
media.
And the
Yeah.
gaming, I've learned, is engineered for that. Social media is engineered for that. They want you to get as much dopamine as
Yes,
possible. And then that's one of the reasons that, like, when they are asked to get off of their screens, it's a
they throw a
disaster,
fit, right?
right?
Yeah.
Because,
And part of that is an age thing too, right? Like a 4-year-old is not going to know how to regulate themselves, one, after all of that dopamine being released in their brain, but also just in general. 4-year-olds love to be in the moment. I love kids so much for this. Like they're so good at being present because they're not aware of anything else. They're not observant enough to know that, stuff is going on in the world and down the street even. So I
Mhm.
love that they can be so present. So when they are playing, let's say Mario Kart or something more addictive like Roblox, they're already wired to be in the moment and present and really enjoying what they are doing. But with this added layer of dopamine dumps, it makes it darn near impossible to take it away from them without them throwing a fit. Even if you do the whole, you got 5 more minutes, buddy, or 2 more minutes, buddy. We can do that for sure. And eventually they can learn, but it's still really, really hard for them. And what I see is when, let's say, a 9-year-old comes to me and the mom says, he throws these massive tantrums every single time, and it doesn't matter what I do or what technique I try to get him off the video game, but it's dinner time. And so sometimes I just let him do it. He throws these massive tantrums. I want to say this: 9-year-olds, a neurotypical child at 9 years old should not be throwing tantrums
Mm,
about
interesting.
really anything. There are bad days, there are bad moments, there are times when we have meltdowns. We know that as adults, right?
Mhm,
Even adults have those moments. But a 9-year-old having a pattern of tantrums, neurotypical
mhm.
tantrums that shouldn't be happening. So if something is going on that is creating these habitual tantrums, there's something wrong.
Right,
And
right.
it's okay as parents. I talk to so many parents about this is, if it doesn't feel right for you, you got to listen to that.
Mhm.
It's not right. It's not right. If it doesn't feel good and you're really sitting in this anxiety or frustration, there is something to that. And that, especially if they're older than that, I get 15-year-olds coming in that the mom will say he throws these huge fits and completely melts down every weekend or every couple days. That is not healthy,
Right.
nor do we want that for our kids or for our families. And there's something wrong, and we have to look at that.
That's actually what got me even interested in this entire area. Um,
Yeah, that's like I feel like every mom's
yeah, we all
story
thought,
in
oh,
this
this is
space
so
is that.
great. Yeah,
Yep.
oh man, iPads are the best. And
Yes.
my son would bite me. He would
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
absolutely turn into a werewolf, just lose his mind. And I
Mind.
thought, this is absolutely insane. And I
Mm-hmm,
started investigating all of this. And that's really what got me interested in studying
mm-hmm,
screen time in kids. And one of the books I read was pointing out, notice how your kids act when you say, it's time to put away the Legos, or
mm-hmm.
it's time to put away the crayons, or it's time to put
Yeah.
away the iPad. they don't
Right.
bite you
Totally
and freak
different.
out. Yeah. So there's
Yeah.
absolutely something going on in their
Yes.
brain that is definitely different.
Now, I do want to mention that there are some people, and I am this person as well as one of my sons, that are more prone to being a dopamine seeker. Okay, so there are people who have a harder time managing at older ages. So you might have one kid who at 6 years old, you're like, "Hey, buddy, put the iPad down." They're like, "Okay," and they're fine. And then you might have another kid who's 8 years old, and he's like, "Hey, buddy, it's time to put the iPad," and they throw this massive fit, but they might struggle with what I call dopamine chasing. And so that is people who eat really unhealthy foods. So really just cannot stop themselves from eating the cinnamon rolls. No matter how many times mom says, do not eat the cinnamon rolls, they're for tomorrow, they cannot resist. They want it so bad. It's all they can think about. And it's the same with screens. So video games or whatever it is, social media, scrolling TikTok, like that is just what they want. So you're going to see kids handling it differently. And that's okay if they are a dopamine chaser. Like I said, I am that's how I grew up, really having a struggle with that. But those we have to be extra careful with because they are more prone to addiction, not just with screens, but with substances
And
too.
I've learned that we have a lot of ADHD in our family, and I've learned
Yes,
that the screen time is even more addicting
yes, yes,
with
for
that
ADHD.
situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even like I have one of my sons is just socially not as confident, and it never has been. He's a little bit more reserved, shy, doesn't put himself out there, doesn't really care to have much of a social life. So that's another reason that we are like, okay, no screens. Not because you can't enjoy a screen ever if you are more of an introvert, but more of like, if I allow you to get in the world of screens, I know darn well you are going to fully immerse
Yeah.
and you are going to find a community online, and I will not be able to pull you out of that because
Mhm.
that is so much more comfortable for you in this time of your life than being a seventh grader putting yourself out there. So we have to allow our kids to struggle and really look at what's going on with their brain and their heart and what's best for their future.
And I think too, just if we can offer things that are, even more enticing, like
Yeah,
honestly, the trampoline might actually, be more fun, or the
right.
picnic, or the museum, or whatever we offer, c- you know, you can't just say, don't do screens and then just sit
Right.
around and stare at each
And
other.
walk away. Yeah.
But it's like, hey guys, let's go plant a garden. Let's go ride our
Oh my
bikes.
gosh, yes. So I present nationwide and I always open my presentation, and I don't think this is in my book, but maybe it is. So since you just read it, you'll have to refresh my memory.
Okay.
But I open every presentation asking the audience to sit for a moment and think of a favorite memory, just something that, is it in my book? I
No,
can't
it's not.
remember.
But
Okay, okay. A favorite memory, something that warms their heart when they think about it. And then I go through the presentation. And like you said, sometimes in my presentation, depending on the audience, I do get into like the dark stuff and the reality of what's going on with a lot of teenagers. So it's nice for them to have that favorite memory to lean on. Anyways, at the end of the presentation, I ask how many of you had a memory that had to do with family? And almost everyone raises their hands. And then my second question is how many with had to do with friends? And then pretty much the rest of the people will raise their hand. And then I'll say, what about a memory that was something you were proud of, an accomplishment, or even something really peaceful? And maybe like the last three or four people will raise their hand. And I will ask, is that it? Family, friends, an accomplishment, or peace? And everyone is doing this. And then I ask, if you're bold enough to raise your hand at this one, is there anyone whose favorite memory had to do with playing Fortnite till 5 a.m. in the morning, or scrolling
exactly.
TikTok till 2 a.m., or anything that has to do with screens? And I'll tell you this one sweet little boy was like, mine was going to the movies with my grandpa. And I was
Huh.
like, okay, that falls in the family category, right? Um, and so what I have found is that this is why my tagline for Look Up is life is better offline. Not everything is going to be offline. We know that we live in a very digital era, but time with family, friends, or an accomplishment or peaceful moment alone has so much more weight than anything that you can find on screens. I have been presenting for 10 years, and I mean, that's not one, thousands and thousands of people, and all of my clients, we do this exercise. Not one person has said, I haven't even heard, and I'm expecting this full, anyways, I'm expecting to hear, like a 13-year-old girl say, well, we had a sleepover and we made a TikTok together. I haven't even heard that yet. I'm waiting for
Mhm.
that. I'm sure that will happen. But either way, that's still doing something with your
Yeah,
friends.
it's still different than watching
Um,
TikTok by yourself in your room at
right,
2 a.m.
right. Or having a sleepover and all the girls are quiet because they're all watching
Yes,
separate YouTube videos or
that's
TikTok
true. That's
videos.
true.
So yeah, I think that that is huge for connection and for families to remember that these memories, your favorite memories, the things that you will hold with you the rest of your life, have to do with family, friends, or an accomplishment that can,
Absolutely.
something you're proud of. Yeah.
And since you just mentioned TikTok, one of the
Mm-hmm.
next things that you mentioned is contributing all of this is this new culture of attention seeking and like
Mm-hmm.
everything's about me,
Mm-hmm.
selfies and TikTok, and just
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what our kids are seeing is people doing stuff that I feel like we 10, 20 years ago would have just thought was like so ridiculous and self-absorbed. If you had seen somebody at the Grand Canyon taking a picture of themselves making a duck
Alone, right.
face, you'd have been like, that girl is so full of herself. Why does she think somebody wants to see? What? And it's
Yes,
everywhere now. It's
I know.
absolutely commonplace. And so,
It's,
what can
yeah,
we
it's
do? Like,
It's definitely been normalized, but I'm still baffled sometimes when I look around and I'm like, man, we really are living in such an egocentric world, with that. And so, one thing for parents to do is put their own phones down, have your own boundaries so that you're not scrolling things, so that you are making eye contact with your kids, so that you are giving the attention that they need and deserve at home.
yeah,
Attention really means wanting to feel important and valued. It doesn't mean you're going to go do something crazy for that attention. It can be seeking healthy attention, which is natural as
mhm,
humans. Um, it's the unhealthy attention seeking, the victim fishing online, the posting very sexual photos, glorifying trauma and trying to get attention in that way. And that's really hard. And so we have to sit down with our kids and teach them basically when they are ready to have social media, teaching them social media etiquette of understanding that, well, for one, a lot of people love to be vulnerable online, and that can be helpful at times. However, a 13-year-old girl being vulnerable online usually is not the safest thing to do because she's lacking that prefrontal cortex of impulse control and risk assessment to tell her like, hey, I might regret saying this on in front of everyone.
right.
It's like reading your diary for the whole world to read. And so we have to kind of teach our kids how to pause with that, but also teaching them one is that digital footprints do not go away. They're on forever and ever.
Yeah.
And they, you might post something that could be incriminating or cause really big problems in your future. And we have to teach our kids that piece of it. But the attention part really does start at home and helping our kids feel value offline. That self worth is being built offline rather than by likes and views and comments online.
And like you said before with the memories, giving them chances to have accomplishments, do
Yeah.
things on their own, have some freedom, have a little
Hmm.
bit of a longer leash. And I mean, it's just amazing how good they feel when they get to do something like, I just let my son the other day walk from school to the ice
Hmm.
cream parlor, which was
Hmm.
probably 5 blocks, and buy the ice
Yes.
cream himself. And I swear he like looked like he was standing taller. Like he was so pleased with
Love that.
himself.
Yeah.
And like that feels so good. That's probably that sort of dopamine, oxytocin thing that
Exactly.
you're
Hmm.
never gonna forget. It gives you confidence. It's like one of those building blocks. And like I'm assuming just likes on Instagram is just a dopamine dump,
Yeah, it
and
is.
it's not lasting. It doesn't really mean anything.
Right. Well, and you talk to a lot of these teenagers who maybe have a big following, but they are coming and they're still feeling so anxious and so depressed and feel so lonely because of that lack of oxytocin and putting on the facade that you live this perfect lifestyle, and that everything's great and that you have so many friends when really you don't. And so we want our kids, especially during those crucial hormonal adolescent years, to build their self-worth in real life with who they are, who they want to be, building their identity, rather than putting all of their energy into building their online platform and their online identity, because that self-worth online is not lasting.
And they also, you know, one of the other pieces you mentioned in the book is social media, which is just, if all six of these are put together, social media probably has like maybe the most weight of all of those
Hmm.
things right now.
Hmm.
There's a zillion reasons that social media can be problematic. One is these unrealistic comparisons, because we all know that friend that looks amazing and
Hmm.
posts their vacations and posts their this and that. And we know the real them. We know that not everything is going so great in their life right now. But if you
Right.
just saw their Instagram, man, it looks real cool. And we
Right.
know that. I'm 46 years old and I know that. And an 11-year-old
You're
is
still
not,
affected, right?
yeah.
Like
And you're
I
not
I know
gonna,
that, but I still question. I'm like, oh my God, she looks so good. Like I
yeah.
wish I was in Greece right now.
But
Like why am I
certainly
stuck
your
here?
11-year-old
Oh
doesn't
my gosh,
realize
right.
that, like, just
No.
because they're posting that they got this new cute outfit doesn't mean that they don't feel terrible about their
Right.
self-esteem or that their
Right.
parents yelled at them this morning or
Right.
whatever.
Exactly.
And so, like, and also they can't escape the drama. Like,
Right.
when we came home as kids, we could just leave it at the door and have a weekend with our family, and it
Yeah.
just chases them and is like this
Yeah.
constant stressor. And
We
so,
all know that our social life is not meant to be on 24/7, that we all need balance. We need to have some productive alone time or relaxing time with family. And in today's world, kids don't realize that because Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, it's on all the time. And so they don't get that break. They can try to set their own boundaries and they can try to set their own time limits. And some of them are very successful with it. But most kids and teenagers have to grow and mature to really be successful with those boundaries. And honestly, adults need to work on that too. There's so many adults that struggle with those boundaries as well. So
yeah.
it's really hard to turn off the social life.
And Jonathan Haidt, that wrote the Anxious
Mhm.
Generation, is suggesting no social media until 16. What are
Mhm.
your thoughts?
So I have been saying that same thing for 10 years. I see a huge shift usually around junior year, which is around 16, 17 years old. Around junior year of high school, I see a huge maturity shift in most teenagers, and they are more developed and have already started working on their self-worth. They've already worked on their coping skills so that by the time they're about junior in high school, they are more equipped to handle the digital world. Now, when I have clients who have been on TikTok since they were 9 years old, by the time they are junior in high school, they still are not ready for the digital world. So I have always suggested waiting around until about junior year of high school.
And then you also suggest something that I think is a really good way to remember this is that you don't just hand the keys to your 16-year-old. You take it in tiny
Hmm.
steps. They go to driver's
Hmm.
ed. You spend hours and hours behind the wheel with them. And
Hmm.
so, do you feel like when we feel like they are finally ready, how can we incrementally show them how to use this, show them the pitfalls?
Hmm.
Like, is this something maybe do we give it to them senior year so that we can
Hmm.
kind of give them training wheels before they have it them like by themselves in college?
I am a very big fan of introducing the online world and social media while they still are under your roof. I'm going to take it back even further because, like I said, my book is a little outdated now, and I'm actually working on an updated version. But back when I wrote it, I think I mentioned 5 social media harms in the book, and now my list is over 30. So
Wow.
it has, and it's still evolving, right? It's never going to stop growing, I don't think. And so we have to stay on top of it. And so when I think of the driver's ed concept, I like to actually take it even further back and remind parents, you did not put your child inside the car without a car seat. Right. And it did not matter how much your little toddler threw a fit. It was a
Yeah.
non-negotiable.
Right.
We have to go from point A to point B, and you are going to be safe. I'm not saying we can never go for a drive or enjoy the ride, but you're going to have to be strapped in age appropriately. And that's how I feel with devices, online use, and social media is I'm not saying that you cannot go for the drive or enjoy or go to school and do something on technology at school. I'm not saying anti-technology, but I am saying no matter what kind of fit they throw, we need to strap them in age appropriately so that they are safe and that they learn how to be online in the most appropriate way. And so I like for parents to start young talking about it. And sometimes that means just mentioning what the newest social media apps are, or you just heard about Snapchat and you're learning about it. And, or like I will tell my kids, like, oh, yeah, I was on Facebook the other day and there was this total scam that I almost fell for, and so
Mm-hmm.
little examples like
Mm-hmm.
that where you're normalizing that people are on social media. You're not sitting there saying, no, 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 never, never, never. You're saying you're not ready for it yet, but let's have conversations so that we can get you ready for it. So you want to start with the conversation piece, no matter how old they are. And then around junior, senior year, you start to introduce one app at a time. And I like smaller time limits because when we have smaller time limits on the apps, we use it with more intention and purpose rather than just that mindless scroll. We want to avoid the addiction piece and we want to protect our kids from predators online. So we need to minimize the amount of time that they are online so that they are using it for intention and purpose. So, say you're ready for them to get Snapchat, you set a 30-minute limit a day, which sounds so short, but you better believe that those kids are not going to be mindlessly scrolling. They're not going to be sending ridiculous Snapchats. They're going to be getting on, checking to see who snapped them, snap them back real quick, and then put it down to go do it because they don't want to waste their 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If you give them free reign, then they can easily sit for hours, scrolling whatever app you're allowing them to have. And so I like it when parents start with that small time limit, but every kid is different and every case is different. Like I said, you might have a kid who doesn't care about Snapchat, but wants it because the soccer team shares group messaging on it and they need to be in the know about certain things, but they don't really care. And so they get on Snap to check that. You don't need to set their time limits. Like they're already capable of doing that for themselves. So every kid is different in that area. Um, some parents, and I like this too, get, say, for example, an Instagram account for their daughter, but they get it on their phone, password protected, so that the parent is the one who can log in and see it, and the daughter has to sit with mom while looking at
I was going to
Instagram.
say that seems like part of the training wheels is maybe like you need to be sitting next to
Yeah.
me the first few times you
Yeah.
use it. Don't ever be using it alone in your room. You're always in
Right.
public.
Right.
You can, feel free to ask me any questions. If you see something that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't seem cool, bring me over. And definitely, I want to
Mm-hmm.
mention that predator part. I think maybe I read it in your blog. What happened that time that you were like playing ukulele on Instagram or something? Or which
Yes,
was
on
it
the
TikTok?
TikTok. So before I was anti-TikTok, because I am actively anti-TikTok, um, I wanted to try it out because, like any app, my clients would come in, tell me about the newest app, and I would download it and see what it's all about. So I was on TikTok, and I was playing like "You Are My Sunshine" or something very innocent, and singing on the with the ukulele, and the amount of men that commented about my body, about all sorts of sexual things were, I mean, it was astonishing and disgusting. And I'm a grown woman. I can't imagine being a 12-year-old girl a 9-year-old girl,
Right.
and I, the private messaging with pictures being passed, that's traumatic to see, especially if you're a little girl. And I've had to work with a lot of clients who have struggled with trauma from what they've seen online.
Yeah.
We are affected by the content that we consume, whether that's content we're choosing to consume or content that the algorithm is setting in place for us or content that people are sending us. And so just it's human nature to be affected. And so we have to be really careful with our kids.
And I have to share a real worst case scenario example, but this is actually somebody I know. It's a friend of a friend. Their daughter was about 12, I think. She was on Roblox. She had the chat thing. So she started chatting with who she thought was a 13-year-old boy. He sent pictures of
Mm-hmm.
himself. He was super
Mm-hmm.
cute. He was flirty. And
Mm-hmm.
then her parents were pretty clueless. And one night she decided to go out and meet him because he said, "Hey, meet me at the park." And this is like
Yeah.
10, 11 at night. And she went to
Mm.
the park. And thank God, it turns out it was a full-grown man. He was a complete
Mm-hmm.
predator. And she went to the park, and right as she showed up, all these cops swarmed because it turns out they had been following him and like watching
No.
his online stuff because he already
Oh
was
my
a
gosh.
um a predator. And
Yeah.
so they swarmed in and they arrested him, and because they knew they were surveilling his online
Good.
stuff, and they saw that he had planned to meet this girl, and they
Oh
found
my
in his
gosh.
trunk ropes and duct tape, and he was absolutely going to kidnap her.
Yes.
And thank God
And if
they
I could tell you the amount of stories I've heard like that, you, I think I'm always holding myself back because we don't always want to be fear mongering
right,
or, create a depressive episode, right? Like
right.
we want to be realistic, but I hear these stories all the time, and I have to help clients struggling with trauma with these stories all the time, which is why I feel so, so strongly about it. Our kids are on an online playground where predators know exactly
Yeah.
where to go, what to say to them. I had a client who had a unicorn app game for 4-year olds, and a predator found her there.
Oh
So,
man.
and our kids are so easily impressionable. I don't want to say they're stupid because they're not by any means stupid, but they are impressionable and can be manipulated and persuaded very easily, especially with AI now.
Yeah. So, you know, we know that this is going on. We know that, some teens just are not coping well. So hopefully what we've
Mm,
discussed here can help give people some tips of just different things they can do with their kids to just help them with their coping skills, help them with their offline life so that they have more
yeah.
going on. They're not so into it. But how do we talk to our kids about suicide? And also, I know it's age dependent. If somebody,
Right.
if you hear it in the media and your 5-year-old is listening, or if your 10-year-old asks you about it, like what are
Yeah.
some tips we can have and guidelines? Because I know it's really tough for parents to talk about, but it's really important.
Yeah. Oh, it's so uncomfortable. The first thing to remind yourself is that depending on how old they are, but younger than you probably want to know, they've probably already heard that word. They've already, someone at school has said it, or it's being talked about, or, that is the thing with the online world is like, say a second grader has an older brother who, is watching a TikTok and the TikTok is talking about something like suicide or self-harm, and then they tell the 7-year-old about it, and then the 7-year-old goes to school and like thinks it's funny, ha ha ha. So it is more relevant than I think people want to. So the best thing to do is if your kid comes to you and asks a question, or if you're just wanting to start the conversation, which I am a fan of. I am a fan of like sitting in the discomfort and having conversations, even if the kids don't bring it up. But you want to ask them first, what do you think it is? What do you believe suicide is? What do you think that word means? And let them share what their thoughts are, and then correct them where they need to be corrected, and guide the conversation kind of with their thoughts. and share with them that it's not something that um, that is acceptable. That's not the right word. You have to be careful. I want to be like politically correct because I don't want to offend anyone. But at the end of the day, as a mom, I have told my kids it's not okay to do. Like suicide
Mhm.
is not a joke. You don't joke about it, and you are not to try and do anything that would hurt your body or hurt our family. And so we are going to be here for you and we are available for you. If you're ever going through something hard, that is not an option, and there are other options that we can talk about, but suicide is not going to be one of them for you. It's just not an option.
Mm-mm.
I've said that to my kids so many times of like,
Mhm.
I jokingly, like, because I have four boys, so they're always getting into some sort of collision, and I'm always jokingly saying, "You're not allowed to hurt yourself. Your body is I made that body. You are not allowed to get that thing hurt." So I kind of go with that mindset of like, you're not allowed to do that thing. That one thing is so serious, and it is so important for you to understand that like whatever comes your way, there are
Yeah,
solutions
it's
for
off the
that,
table.
and that is not the one. And
What?
I will always walk you through that.
And in the book, I feel like you had some great sentences about like saying, you could say an example, whether it's on a show or if in worst case scenario, someone at your school it happened to or something,
Uh-huh.
you say, it's sad, but you have a mom and a dad that you can talk
Mm-hmm.
to anytime,
Mm-hmm.
and we're here for
Mm-hmm.
you. And also saying, like, really, really emphasizing that suicide doesn't solve anything. It
Right.
just passes the hurt onto the
Right.
people that you love. You were
Yeah.
feeling so hurt and so down, and then you just passed that on to us, and we have to now live with this the rest of our lives of how
Right.
sad and hurt we are because you're
Right.
gone, and helping them to realize that it affects other people and it's
Right.
not a quick fix and it's a permanent fix.
Yeah, the
And just
finality is very real.
like,
I think, yeah, I've said to my kids, because they have, especially when I was writing my book, they were asking questions and why do you have so many clients that want to do that? And of course, they all had parents, and some of them were very involved parents, and that was what was so perplexing, and which is why I found these other factors that are playing into a part of it. But maybe their parents didn't know to talk to them about these things, right? Or maybe their parents didn't feel comfortable talking to them about these things, and because it did become such a glorified trend, and they're lacking that impulse control, and they're searching for their immediate fix, and they're feeling lonely, and they don't know how to cope, that to them seems like an option. And so saying to your kids something like, I will always be here for you. And there are some people who are so, so sad and see no way out, but I'm here to tell you that there is always a way out.
mhm. And just knowing if they bring something to you, please don't throw it under the rug. If they say, "Hey, I
Right.
saw this on a show," don't be like, "Oh, we don't do that in our family," and just
Yeah,
walk
and
away. Like,
you don't want to react in a way that's going to signal to your kids, "Oh, I can't bring that up to mom and dad," or "Oh, now I'm in trouble because I brought this thing up." You don't want to push it away. You want to welcome that conversation, stay curious, stay interested with them, and just warm and welcoming so that you can have a productive conversation that's effective. And definitely don't brush it under the rug for sure.
well, thank you so much. I want to just switch a tiny bit.
Yeah.
It's still related with this, but the last question I like to ask everybody is related to how, we've been saying try to have your kids have a life off of line and try if you can to give them some freedom, some control. I think that's a lot of it too, is some kids really feel like they have no control over their own lives. Like they're kind of
Mhm.
living this dream that their parents have for them. And
Right.
I'm just wondering, like, if you can remember and share a time in your childhood that you remember being allowed to do something without parents, without any adults
Ooh.
around, and just like sometime when you were like, "Ooh, I've got some freedom," and how old were you and how did it make you feel?
I was 5 and I got a Barbie Jeep for Christmas,
Ooh.
like one of the Power
The
Wheels.
ones that you ride in?
Yeah,
Oh,
was
wow.
that they were called Power Wheels, right?
I think.
And I was allowed to drive it all around the neighborhood, and I became the cool neighborhood ride because all the kids in the neighborhood would want to catch a ride in my Barbie Jeep, and I just thought it was so cool. And I mean, this was back in like 1991. So it was, a totally different time where parents did. They let you go out and do whatever you wanted until the streetlights came on, right? And so that's what I did. And I felt like such a grown up. I felt so cool, so independent. My mom just let me go wherever I wanted within the neighborhood in my Barbie Jeep. So that would probably be my first memory of that.
I love that. And five.
Hmm.
And I think,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us did stuff like that real young. And
Hmm. Hmm.
I think we just have to remind ourselves, sometimes we think back, I want everybody to think back to those memories and realize, oh, shoot, my kids are way older and I don't let them
Yes.
do things like that. And
Right.
just see if you can tiptoe into a little bit more independence because you were
Hmm.
able to handle it and they'll be able to handle it and they're
And
going to
that's
love it.
exactly what, yeah, that builds those good memories and that self-worth that we want our kids to have.
Thank you so, so much for talking. This is really
Yeah.
valuable stuff and really important stuff because,
Hmm.
it's inescapable in the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
Everybody's got
Yeah.
phones and we're all headed there at some point. So,
Right.
definitely everybody check out her book because it's got all this information and way more that I couldn't even bring up. And like I said, just ways to talk to your kids about this stuff. I was being very ineloquent about it, but she's got it like locked down in the book of exactly what you can say to your kids. So just check out For the Sake of Our Youth, a therapist's perspective on raising your family in today's culture. And I was able to get it as an ebook on Amazon. So please check it out, everybody. And thank you so much, Tessa.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Screen Less, Play More, the podcast. A special thanks to Neil Penninger, who composed our theme music. Please join us at screenlessplaymore.com for ideas on how to get your kids outside, away from screens, and enjoying independent play. We also have book reviews, screen-free toy and gift ideas, and so much more.